So we need to talk about roles today. One of the things that is most confusing, I think, for people in ministry is what is their role. And the issue around roles really developed with the kind of elevation of one role over all the others, and that was the role of the pastor. The pastor, however, is a term that's only used one time in all of Scripture, and that is in the context of four of the roles. It says in Ephesians, and he gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, and some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors, and some to be teachers. Now, the difficulty is that the way that then that has been counter-reacted is to say that or suggest that the apostle is the leader and then all the other roles are kind of subordinate to that. And that's not really accurate either, because the term apostle is really an outcast. It's a degraded term most of the time. There's 22 different base uses of the word apost, which have to do with being divorced from, being outside of, being lower than. And so what we see it isn't really the way that that term was meant to be used. It wasn't meant to be used as a authoritative leader. It's more accurately a description of somebody who is outside the box. So apostate means somebody who doesn't believe the norm. And heresy is somebody that is promoting a philosophy that's contrary to the norm. And so what you see is that the term apostle has to do with somebody who is outside of normal thinking. This is the creator, the originator. When you think about this role inside of the function of society, that role really has to do with how it is that you initiate or originate things. Then that leads us into examining the other roles that are then described there in Ephesians. And if we do that, then we start to look at some maybe very practical ways to look at these different functions. The word prophet is simply a professor. So you have an originator and a professor. Then the evangelist is somebody who gives faith. The word actually fundamentally means distributor of faith. So then when you look at the shepherd or the pastor, it has to do more with being, say, a coach or somebody who is guiding or nurturing. Finally, the teacher is somebody that is replicating what's already been originated and professed and encouraged and guided. Now it's kind of in a function where it's passed on. The thing that's not present in those descriptions, but it is assumed, is the term brothers or brother and sister. And so if we step back and maybe think this through a little bit better than it has been, and we think, all right, what are these roles really trying to do? We see your apostle and prophet as your originators or your plowers and planters. We see the evangelist pastor as your faith givers and guiders. And then we see the teachers and brothers and sisters as being the way to then establish it beyond what is current. Let's look at it through the role of a family. Your apostle prophet would be more like your male role, your God role, your originator role, your creator role, your initiator. And what you would want to see inside of the male portion of it is you'd want to see the male initiative. The female role would be your evangelist pastor. That would be your encourager and your nurturer, your developer, your ability to cultivate or your ability to grow somebody. The natural role of a mother. So you have Father in heaven, you have Mother in earth, you have a thought that's out of this world above, you have grounded thoughts, if you will, of this earth. And then finally you have teachers and brothers and sisters that would be the children. They would then pass that on to generations that then would go and pass it on to the next. And so if we think about those roles as a dynamic of a family, we see that pattern actually makes sense, where you see the initiator, the receiver, and then the regenerator role inside of those three or those six functions. So if we were to just elevate one, if we were just to take the term pastor and pull that out, which let's call it the female role, then what we would do is then we would over amplify the dynamic of nurturing. Well, what do we see in church today? Except for an over amplification of that role to the rejection of a lot of the others, including the male roles, or the initiating roles, or the leadership roles. And now what we're starting to see is that this dynamic has then saturated over into all of society, and there's now a tension between your female and your male roles, and this is resulting in all sorts of turmoil and all sorts of difficulties, not just in families, but in the whole concept of society. Today, more than ever, there's a need for creativity, origination, and for new things. And that would be fundamentally your creator or your initiator, your originator role. And so today, more than ever, there's a need for the dedicated, or as it says in Acts 2, they devoted themselves fervently, not to the pastor's teaching, but to the apostles' teaching, and to breaking bread together, and to prayer. And so today, it seems like what is most needed is a counter-dispensational concept which just used the pastor and elevated it and really just dismissed everything else and then redefined that role into being able to be somebody who cultivates and who nurtures and develops. But a healthier balance, a healthier understanding of certainly biblical Christianity is to look at those functions in a wholeness of how it is that they're meant to work together for the initiation, the response, and the replication of life. And that is, I believe, what is our greatest need today, is the reclaiming of all the roles that are described to support the life that God gives us.